What's up, guys? Welcome back to Michigan Muckraker. My name is Michelle. Today is December 5th of 2023. And did you know that November 15th of 2023, the FCC adopted rules to eliminate digital discrimination for communities with poor internet access? I didn't either until a friend and viewer sent the commissioner of the FCC, Commissioner Carr, has a statement about these new rules. And I'm going to read those first, and then we're going to get into the Biden Rural Playbook that's part of the infrastructure bill that was passed in 2021. So I have so much to share with you. I really hope I can get through it all, but I tried to do the most important first. So let's jump in. The first thing is this Office of Commissioner Brendan Carr opposes President Biden's plan to give the administrative state effective control of all internet services and infrastructure in the United States. This is a complete takeover of the internet by the government. That's what's going on right now as we speak. This unlawful power grab chooses central planning over free market capitalism. Sounds familiar? Of course, it's part of the Great Reset and United Nations Agenda 21, and I'm going to prove it today in this video. So first, we're going to see what this individual has to say. Washington, D.C., November 6, 2023, FCC Commissioner Carr issued the following statement. Democrats have been in charge of the FCC and administrative agencies in D.C. for approaching 12 out of the last 16 years. They have had the opportunity over that stretch of time to put in place nearly all federal telecom policy, any federal telecom policy of their choosing. In fact, the federal government has allocated hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars for the purpose of ending the digital divide, while Democrats have run the administrative state. After all of that time and after all of that spending, the Biden admin has concluded that the Democrats' policies are not working. I agree with President Biden on that point. The administration's broadband policies are failing. The costs of building internet infrastructure in this country have skyrocketed thanks to the Biden administration's inflationary policies. Of course, more regulations means more money for the company to be created to begin with, and that means that cost will go to the consumer. It does every single time. The administration has no plan for filling a now empty spectrum pipeline, one that is vital to America's economy and geopolitical leadership. Meanwhile, the FCC is just sitting on spectrum that could connect millions of Americans to new 5G services. Well, I'm kind of glad that they're not connecting them, but that's just my opinion. The administration has needlessly blocked and delayed new broadband infrastructure bills. Fiber and cell components are laying fallow in warehouses. Okay, permitting reform has gone nowhere, and the Biden administration is preparing to waste additional taxpayer dollars through its multi-billion-dollar Internet for All initiative by pursuing extraneous political goals at the expense of connecting Americans. So that's how it ties into the rural playbook, is because the excuse is that for equity's sake, so everybody can have internet, the FCC needs to take control. Of course, that's not really necessary, but they're just using that as an excuse. And the really concerning thing is that, of course, the diversity, inclusion, and equity is involved in all this. And so it's going to hurt freedom of speech in the end. The Biden administration is taking away all the wrong lessons from its failed broadband policies. Rather than righting the ship, the Biden administration is going hard left. It is now blaming the private sector and free market capitalism itself for the administration's own policy shortfalls. The problem, the admin has apparently concluded, is that the FCC has never gone full command and control when it comes to regulating the internet. So last month, President Biden gave the FCC its marching orders. The president called on the FCC to implement a one-page section of the 2021 Infrastructure's Investment and Jobs Act by adopting new rules of breathtaking scope, all in the name of digital equity. For the first time ever, those rules would give the federal government a roving mandate to micromanage nearly every aspect of how the internet functions, from how ISPs allocate capital and where they build, to the services that consumers can purchase, from the profits that ISPs can realize and how they market and advertise services to the discounts and promotions that consumers can receive. Talk about central planning. It's egregious. I can't believe I haven't heard about this, so thank you, Michelle Wise. If you need family photography done for Christmas, please check out local business, Michelle Wise Photography. I'll have it linked in the description. Not sponsored, just a friend and, again, a viewer of the show. So thank you if you're watching. Hi, Michelle. Hope you guys are well. Needless to say, Congress never contemplated the sweeping regulatory regime that President Biden asked the FCC to adopt, let alone authorized the agency to implement it. Nonetheless, the commission will vote next week on November 15th to put Biden's plan in place, and they voted, of course, yes on party lines, 3-2. President Biden's plan hands the administrative state effective control of all internet services and infrastructure in the country. Never before in the roughly 40-year history of the public internet has the FCC, or any federal agency for that matter, claimed this degree of control over it. Indeed, President Biden's plan calls for the FCC to apply a far-reaching set of government controls that the agency has not applied to any technology in the modern era, including Title II common carriers. The closest analog would be the heavy-handed rules the FCC applied to the Ma Bell telephone monopoly during the height of the New Deal era, a copper wire period of time when it was hard to distinguish between government regulator and telephone provider. That's where we're going with the internet. It's going to be hard to distinguish between government regulator and internet provider. Do not take my word for it. The text of the order expressly provides that the FCC would be empowered for the first time to regulate each and every ISP's network infrastructure deployment, the reliability, the upgrades, the maintenance, customer premises equipment, and installation. The speeds, the capacities, the latency, data caps, throttling, pricing, promotional rates, imposition of late fees, opportunity for equipment rental, installation time, contract renewal terms, service termination terms, and use of customer credit and account history, and mandatory arbitration clauses, pricing, deposits, discounts, customer service, language options, credit checks, marketing or advertising, contract renewal. The government's going to have control over all that instead of the person who gives you internet. The business that provides the service will no longer have control. That is crazy. The government will have control over upgrades, account termination, transfers of other covered entity transfers to another covered entity, and service suspension. As exhausting as it was to read that list, the FCC itself says it is not an exhaustive list. The Biden admin's plan empowers the FCC to regulate every aspect of the internet sector for the first time ever. The plan is motivated by an ideology of government control that is not compatible with the fundamental precepts of free market capitalism. But it gets worse. How? I don't know. The FCC reserves the right under this plan to regulate both actions and omissions, whether recurring or a single instance. In other words, if you take any action, you may be liable, and if you do nothing, you may be liable. There is no path to complying with this standardless regime. It reads like a planning document drawn up in the faculty lounge of a university's Soviet studies department. I've been calling that for a long time. I don't want to be USSA, but it looks like we're going that way. President Biden's plan sweeps entire industries within the FCC's jurisdiction for the first time in the agency's 90-year history. It would be one thing if the FCC combined? Sorry, I don't know that. Maybe I'm just an ignorant fool sometimes, or maybe it's a mistype, but let me know. It's an intrusive new regime to ISPs or even businesses within the communications sector. It does not. The draft FCC order says that we are not explicitly tasked with regulating entities outside the communications industry, a rare moment of regulatory humility. But it then goes on to say that the FCC will do so in this case nonetheless. The moment passed. Landlords are now covered, construction crews are now covered, marketing agencies are now covered, banks are now covered, the government itself is now covered, all newly regulated by the FCC and liable for any act or omission that the agency determines has an impermissible impact on a customer's access to broadband. Congress never authorized the FCC to regulate these industries or entities, so to all the businesses and individuals that will be subject to FCC regulation for the first time ever, welcome. I hope you have good lawyers. This is some serious stuff that, again, I can't believe more people aren't talking about. Even on my Twitter feed, no one's talking about this. President Biden's plan allows the FCC to impose unfunded build mandates on ISPs and unlimited monetary fines on every covered entity. Section 60506, the one-page portion of the infrastructure law that President Biden cites as authority for the FCC's new regime, does not authorize the commission to create or enforce new punitive liability rules or compel builds. Instead, it directs the FCC to facilitate equal access to broadband internet service. That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to not regulate the internet, just make it easier for people in the country to get access to internet. But again, that's just a cover in order to gain control. Nonetheless, the FCC's draft order determines that the agency will apply the full suite of the Communications Act's enforcement powers to any act or omission that violates its new Section 60506 regime, although it will do so with the one minor deviation from the Communications Act norm. It imposes no ceiling on the level of potential fines. This means that the ISPs could very well be compelled to build all internet infrastructure without any compensation, and every decision from the C-suite to the call center will be subject to FCC second-guessing. Crazy. President Biden's plan includes price controls. We all know, I hope we all know, that price controls never work out. Again, look at Russia and all that they did with price controls. It confuses the market. Let the market go. And it's a good system. That's part of natural law. Don't try to manipulate it. It gets messed up every time. But of course, they want it to be messed up, right? It's controlled demolition of the United States of America. Last month, at the 11th hour, the FCC slightly softened its proposal to use its Title II proceeding to regulate broadband rates. Now we know why. So, yeah, in October, the FCC slightly softened its proposal to use its Title II proceeding to regulate broadband rates. The Section 60506 order that the FCC will vote on next week already did and passed expressly states that the FCC can use it to regulate broadband pricing and even an ISP's profitability. The government can tell you how profitable you can be if you start up an internet business. Who would want to start up an internet business? This is how monopolies are created. Title II is no longer necessary to achieve that end, but the Section 60506 rules do more than that. The FCC arrogates to itself the power to review and determine the lawfulness of potential pricing and discounts. So, hey, they want to give you a discount for Christmas? Government has to say if it's okay or not. It even puts the use of credit checks squarely in the crosshairs. Of course, Congress did not give the FCC the power to do any of this. The agency just creates it out of whole cloth. Our system isn't working anymore, or they don't really care about it at all. President Biden's plan adopts an expansive and disfavored theory of liability that Congress neither directed nor authorized the FCC to adopt. The Infrastructure Act speaks in brief and straightforward terms. It states that it is the policy of the United States that, insofar as technically and economically feasible, subscribers should benefit from equal access to broadband. Section 60506 then directs the FCC to adopt rules that facilitate equal access to broadband, again, to the extent technically and economically feasible, and to prevent and eliminate digital discrimination based on income level, race, ethnicity, color, religion, or national origin. Again, eliminate digital discrimination. It's It's impossible. Not everybody wants internet too, by the way. The people that live in the Appalachian Mountains, I would bet many of them don't even want the internet, but maybe they do. Maybe they do. After nearly 2 years and several rounds of comments, the FCC's draft order concludes that there is little or no evidence in the agency's record to even indicate that there has been any intentional discrimination in broadband market within the meaning of the statute. But instead of proceeding with forward-looking rules on that basis, the FCC, at Biden's direction, reads an expansive and disfavored theory of liability into law that exists nowhere in the statutory text. Even in the absence of any evidence of intentional discrimination, the Biden plan states the FCC can impose potentially unbounded liability if the agency finds that some act or even failure to act happened to result in a disparate impact based on the FCC's own judgment. Reading this theory of liability into law conflicts with the Supreme Court's civil rights precedent. The FCC should not adopt it. In the end, the FCC could have adopted rules that lawfully and faithfully implemented Congress's decisions in the Infrastructure Act. The FCC could have taken concrete steps that would have extended high-speed internet services to more Americans. In fact, the FCC cites a few such actions in its draft order that were raised in the record, including eliminating government-imposed barriers and regulatory red tape that have been slowing down broadband builds. Because that's how it works. If it's harder to get your infrastructure out there, then you're not going to be able to do it as fast, obviously. Instead of going that route, the FCC opts for this ideological approach instead. But of course, they're using this as an opportunity to take over the internet. So how does this relate to the rural playbook? Of course, because it's the rural people that don't have internet access that everybody needs to have access to, right? In order for everyone to get on the metaverse, we all need the internet. So this is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Rural Playbook. April 2022 is when it was last updated, at least this article. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law will invest billions of dollars in the rural communities across the country. Supporting Americans living in rural areas remains a top priority for the Biden administration, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law delivers on the president's promise to work toward delivering affordable high-speed internet, safe roads and bridges, modern wastewater systems, clean drinking water, reliable and affordable electricity, and good-paying jobs in every rural community. When I first read that, I'm like, oh, I'm worried. I don't want the federal government involved with all of this, especially when you talk about modern wastewater systems and clean drinking water. I mean, just check out Flint. They still don't have clean drinking water. And this is talking about replacing lead pipes in all the big cities. So we got to trust the government to adequately change our water systems. And then modern wastewater systems, it will eliminate decentralized system. They want everything hooked centrally, right? So no septic system for you. This has to do with the new bills that Michigan are trying to enforce, or create rather, and then enforce. But it's everywhere. It's not just Michigan. So I am not going to get into this entire thing, but I've highlighted some stuff. So real quick, this identifies programs and sources of funds set aside for rural communities under the law. Over 60% of the funding will be distributed via formulas to states and other recipients. This is, by the way, just going to reiterate, this is all our money, okay? Taxpayer dollars. This is our money that they are spending how they want to spend it. Good morning, Connie. I'm here to listen and grimace, she says. Well, thank you. Yes, Grimace is right with this takeover of the internet. Thank you all for joining me. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing and smash the like button. It helps with the algorithm. So the Rural Playbook also provides an overview of key flexibilities and other benefits available to rural communities under the law. As part of this effort, 7 key federal agencies have published rural fact sheets that highlight how to leverage agency resources and compatibilities to help rural communities. So, Department of Transportation, Commerce, Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, Department of Interior and Energy, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and FEMA all have a part to play in the rural playbook. And I have them all highlighted, the stuff that we need to know. So, bipartisan infrastructure law wins for rural America, sure. Provide high-speed internet to every rural home and business. More than 35% of rural Americans and tribal communities lack wired access to broadband at acceptable speeds. Again, define acceptable. I'm pretty sure it's 100 megabytes per second is what they're saying. So now if I want to start up a company and I can only provide at first 50 megabytes per second, I can't start my business because that barrier to entry. And so now there's less competition for the ones that are already established. Sucks. Really sucks. Fix our roads and bridges and make them safer. While Americans living in rural areas account for 19% of the population, they comprise nearly half of all roadway fatalities. The bipartisan infrastructure law will deliver safer roads, bridges, and railroad crossings for rural Americans. Now, again, they say this, but really what's happening is they're doing an inventory because United Nations Agenda 21 is inventory every resource in the world. So that means roads, bridges, railway crossings, culverts, dams, all of this infrastructure needs to be inventoried and assessed whether or not it should be removed, replaced, or, well, for dams, retrofitted, I think is the third R. But anyway, because of the Wildlife Project, America the Beautiful Challenge, which is linked into this, of course, it's all linked together. A lot of roads and bridges that are not safe will end up being taken out in order to make way for wildlife corridors, which is talked about in this infrastructure plan. So the bipartisan infrastructure contains historic levels of funding for rural water projects. I highlighted this because, again, I am really concerned about them coming after well water and septic. It's happened in Mississippi already. My husband's sister she was on well water. They required her to get on the city system. She could not have well water any longer. And she was closer. She was, to the city. So, but it's creeping out to the rural areas. Upgrade electricity and transmission infrastructure. Power outages cost the U.S. economy up to $70 billion each year, and rural communities can be without power for days during these outages. The bipartisan infrastructure law funding to reliably deliver clean, affordable power to more Americans, improving resilience of our grid infrastructure, and helping achieve the president's goal of 100% carbon pollution-free electricity by 2035. 100%. All based on a lie. Zoltan the man. I'm that student that shows up late to class, all disheveled yet eager to learn. Good morning. Good morning. Again, better late than never. Thank you for joining me. Hopefully you have a cup of coffee, get the sleep out of your eyes. Class is in session. Pay attention. I need a ruler. I'm going to get a ruler. I can wave it around at you guys. All right, so the Biden admin releases Rural Playbook, launches Building a Better America Rural Infrastructure Tour to highlight impact of bipartisan infrastructure law. So this tour already took place. Biden didn't even come to Michigan. He sent somebody else, can't remember her name, but that was back all the way in July. And again, there's just so much happening that it's impossible to get it all, but this stuff is so important for anybody that lives in the country. And I found a Blaze article that I'm going to share with you guys on how the rural department was created by Obama, specifically for United Nations Agenda 21. It's nuts. Today, the White House released this infrastructure rural playbook that to help state, local, tribal, and territorial governments in rural areas unlock the benefits. Okay. The rural playbook, found at build.gov/rural, builds on the release of the bipartisan infrastructure law guidebook and provides rural communities with information on the what, when, where, and how to apply for funding under the law. So no community needs to hire a lobbyist to access their government. The Playbook also identifies over 100 programs funded under the law with federal cost share flexibilities and matching requirement waivers. During the month of April, Biden admin officials traveled to dozens of rural communities as part of building a better American rural infrastructure. I highlighted that because it was Build Back Better. And I know you all remember it, but the fact that they changed it to Building a Better America because Build Back Better is World Economic Forum terminology. They used it first. And then when people picked that up, they had to change their terminology, which is why I love internet being open, although it's not as open as it was 10 years ago. Let's see. The Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, of course, is involved, as well as all the other energy sector and agricultural sector that I've listed already. So, the bipartisan infrastructure law delivers on the president's promises to provide high-speed internet. Okay, same thing. That's what they're trying to do. This rural playbook and our rural infrastructure tour are a critical part of our extensive outreach to state, local, tribal, and territorial governments to ensure the people of America can benefit from this once-in-a-generation investment, said Mitch Landrieu, Senior Advisor and Infrastructure Implementation Coordinator. Building a Better America requires these funds to reach rural communities that have been left behind for far too long. You know, some people just want to be left alone. It's not that they're being left behind. It's that they don't want your crap. You know, there are people in the mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, that live off the land and just want to stay that way. Let them be. Not everybody has to be in the Matrix, man. Across the month of April, the Biden-Harris administration will announce billions for rural areas, including rural water projects, flood mitigation, transportation, healthcare, and tribal community grants, along with new technical assistance programs for rural and tribal communities. Healthcare is a big one because I think it was last week I did a story on the fact that rural hospitals are being shut down, and yet what they're doing is they're building sections onto schools instead. So that will be your rural hospital will be attached to a school, which again has all kinds of its own dangers, along with new technical assistance programs for rural and tribal communities. Today, the president is also announcing $1 billion America the Beautiful Challenge that will leverage federal conservation and restoration investments with private and philanthropic contributions to accelerate land, water, and wildlife conservation efforts across the country. America the Beautiful Challenge is anchored by an initial commitment of $440 million of federal resources over the next 5 years to a new public-private grant program administered by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation that will support locally led ecosystem restoration projects that invest in watershed restoration, resilience, equitable access, workforce development, corridors and connectivity, and collaborative conservation consistent with America the Beautiful initiative. This challenge will offer states, tribes, territories, local groups, NGOs, and others the opportunity to apply for multiple grant programs. Yes, the corridors and connectivity. This is going to be human-free areas. That's what corridors are. For animals only, because humans are not to be trusted, according to the United Nations. They can be, but not us. We're just plebs. Don't you know? So this is from May 10th of this year, remarks as prepared for delivery by Senior Advisor John Podesta on the Biden-Harris administration's priorities for the energy infrastructure permitting reform. Now, if you don't know anything about Podesta, just like Fauci before him, he is an evil POS. Now, they don't have the same title, but this is the new climate czar. So, COVID healthcare czar gone, Fauci, and in came John Podesta. Now, he is also attached to Pizzagate, which I'm not going to get into. If you haven't looked into that, I would do a video on Rumble only on that, but there's so many videos on Rumble on Pizzagate. It's a crazy not a theory. But anyway, this individual made this speech. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but when President Biden entered office over 2 years ago, our nation faced multiple challenges at once. A health crisis in the form of a once-in-a-century pandemic, an economy in crisis with millions out of work and small businesses shuttered, a climate in crisis with escalating hurricanes and wildfires devastating American communities. Top of all that, on top of decades of underinvestment in our infrastructure and industrial base and decades of policies that attempted unsuccessfully to grow the economy from top down. So what are you doing? More top-down crap. President Biden said enough. Time to do more top-down stuff. It's time to build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out through a modern American industrial strategy, one that invests in America's workers and positions them to lead the future, onshores critical supply chains to reduce our reliance on China, even though we're bringing that China infrastructure, and that whole market is Chinese. The battery market was created by China. And one that puts underserved communities at the front of the line for new opportunities. That modern industrial strategy is now coming to life thanks to the president's Investing in America agenda, and at the heart of it is clean energy. Don't you love how they basically hid the Green New Deal in Inflation Reduction Act and the Biden Infrastructure Act and all this crap? It's all just the Green New Deal. Clean energy creates good-paying jobs and fuels economic economy, expands our production base, bolsters our energy security by bringing supply chains home, and confronts the climate crisis by cutting harmful pollution. And thanks to all three bills working together, the bipartisan infrastructure laws, CHIPS, and the IRA, we've sent a powerful signal to the private sector. What did I write here? Oh, planned economy. Yeah. They've already responded with over $220 billion in new clean energy announcements. We're proud of what our administration has accomplished so far to change our trajectory on clean energy and climate. But now we need to up the pace and finish the job by lowering the remaining hurdles to achieve 100% clean power by 2035. One big hurdle and a big opportunity is permitting. Right now, the permitting process for clean energy infrastructure, including transmission, is plagued by delays and bottlenecks. This is saying the townships, you guys have stopped progress for far too long by saying, no, we don't want wind and solar here. Those are the delays and bottlenecks. And Whitmer was like, hey, I hear you, Podesta. I'm just going to take that power away from the townships and give it over to the central planner that I myself hired. So I know that it'll be what I want. That's what happened. So this guy is saying the exact same thing as Whitmer. These delays are pervasive at every level of government, federal, state, and local. We got so good at stopping projects that we forgot how to build things in America. No, we don't. I wish we could just build what we want. That's what. I wish I could just build what I want. I can't have 2 garages on my property. No, I don't. I think that it's crazy that they have so much power. These delays are pervasive. I don't want 2 garages, by the way. I was just throwing that out there that they have such power. And I'm fine. These delays are pervasive at every level of government, federal, state, and local. We got so good at stopping projects that we forgot how to build. I'm sorry. I just said that one. That's unacceptable. And given that we have to increase electric transmission 60% over the next 7 years, again, 7 years would be 2030. Why? Why do we have to do this? Does anybody ask that doesn't know about UN Agenda 21? That's what I want to know. Because I know it's because of the United Nations and their stupid sustainable development. But it doesn't say anything about that this entire speech. And it makes me wonder, like, why do people think, why? Why do we have to do it in 7 years, 60%? Most Americans agree. I hate when they say that. 81% of voters support the development of new transmission lines, and a majority say that permitting reform should prioritize clean energy projects over fossil fuels. That's why President Biden has elevated this issue to the highest levels of government for the first time by forming and investing in America cabinet that meets regularly on permitting and other priority issues for infrastructure implementation. Yeah, more government, more bureaucracy, more hoops to jump through. It's great. That's the solution. It's why the Inflation Reduction Act, which invests $1 billion, basically they printed $1 billion, inflated the money supply, and they call it the Inflation Reduction Act. Orwellian. $1 billion in key federal permitting agencies to increase staff capacity, incorporate new technologies, improve coordination, and cite and permit big clean energy projects. Our Council on Environmental Quality has clarified and restored basic safeguards for environmental reviews. And we're getting those reviews done faster than the previous administration ever did. We'll soon be proposing additional reforms to make the environmental review process more efficient and effective. Right. More reforms, more effective. I don't know how anyone believes any of this stuff. I really just don't. Today, I'm excited to announce that 7 agencies, the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council, and the White House have signed a new memorandum of understanding to put electric transmission permitting on fast track, allowing the DOE to exercise its full authority under Section 216H of the Federal Power Act to shepherd projects forward. And I highlighted shepherd here because he used the word on purpose. That's exactly what they're trying to be, or they're working for. Not the good shepherd, though. We've seen some recent wins. Oh, and also they look at us like sheep. I know we're not sheep, but they think we're sheep. We've seen some recent wins, like the final approval of the Trans-West transmission line that will send Wyoming wind energy to California. And this administration is doing all we can with the tools we have, but frankly, we could use more tools to go even further and faster. They need more tools. They need to do it faster, and they need to go further. The president has been clear over the past 6 months that we believe permitting reform should pass on a bipartisan basis, and that we believe permitting needs to be optimized for building out a clean energy economy. So building codes have all been changed to fit United Nations Agenda 21. That's how they do it. And nobody hears about it. That's why today the White House is releasing a list of 11 priorities that Congress should include in permitting legislation. We've got to get more clean energy capacity connected to the grid by speeding up interconnection. Legislation needs to expedite the connection of generation or storage that impacts more than one transmission system, and it needs to allow clean energy project developers to pay the cost of interconnection up front. Then we've got to get that clean energy where it's needed by accelerating the deployment of transmission and making permitting, I keep saying permitting, more efficient and predictable for interstate transmission projects. A key part of this is allowing projects to allocate project cost to customers that benefit from the new transmission. Customers are going to be paying for it. So our tax dollars are going for enslavement, and then a tax on a tax, right? So then the cost goes on us further with that's public-private partnership though, man. It's public money, private profits. It's awesome. Federal agencies need to engage local communities early and often, a crucial ingredient to increase public buy-in for clean energy projects and build in the locations that make the most sense and avoid lengthy litigation delays. You need to engage local communities early and often. I don't think they did that with Goshen. I don't think they did that with Marshall. I don't think they did that with any projects, actually, the mega site projects here in Michigan. They actually signed NDAs. 1 in 5 Michigan politicians have signed NDAs. So yeah, I don't know about that. That support means installing chief community engagement officers at each permitting agency. You know what this reminds me of? When I went to the meetings on the hydro facilities. I keep wanting to say those damn meetings, and I know that sounds funny. But I went to those, and they said something similar, that after these meetings, they're going to find local individuals that will lead the communications between what's happening or what they want to have happen with the hydro facilities. So this is definitely something that they got from the infrastructure bill, is what I'm saying. Establishing new funds that agencies can use to provide grants to local governments and groups, and allowing agencies to transfer funds to tribal nations to increase their permitting capacity. We need to modernize our data collection and permitting technology, from mapping tools to an automated permitting application system. This will help ease the burden for project developers and increase transparency, so public can track our progress. Of course, when they say modernize data collection, that's all Industry 4.0 digital ID stuff in the end. We need specific 2030 and 2035 goals for renewable energy deployment on public lands. And Congress needs to help cite clean energy projects on brownfields by protecting developers from liability as long as they address contamination on site. Somewhere here, we're going to see that $1 billion or something like that is going towards brownfields. So again, the industry creates the poisoned area, the contaminated area, and then we pay for it one way or another. The company never ends up paying for the damage that they do. It's we who pay for it in every way, not only our health, but monetarily as well. It drives me crazy. We've got to fix the costs and delays that are bogging down the licensing process for hydropower projects. Hydro supplies 37% of zero-carbon power in the United States, and more than 30% of all the non-federal hydropower licenses in the U.S. are set to expire by 2030. It's time to reform the process so we can keep this crucial energy source online. Yeah, they're regulating the hell out of it, making it not profitable, and that is why consumers is hot potatoing out of it. They're going to be gone, or if not, then it takes a lot of money to repair them because of all the regulations that the government has put in place. After the dam here in Michigan, after that dam burst in Midland, way more regulations and barriers to entry and all that. So if Congress is ready, this administration is serious about building a secure energy future that strengthens America's economy. If Congress is ready to do the same, they'll pass bipartisan permitting reform that includes the White House's priorities. And they'll help us implement and expand on Biden's Investing in America agenda instead of trying to undo some of the most impactful provisions. Through their Default on America Act, House Republicans have voted to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act's clean energy tax credits. If they have their way, they'll send tens of thousands of new manufacturing jobs overseas, many from their own districts. Again, that's just showing that the tax credits are just bribery. It's just more bribery, more promises to the private sector because EVs aren't profitable. The battery and all this stuff isn't profitable. That's why you need public funds. It's planned economies aren't profitable. Their increase energy costs and increase taxes on hardworking families. Oh, they'll increase energy costs and increase taxes on hardworking families who were expecting to get a credit or a rebate for installing a heat pump or rooftop solar. Oh, so they're acting like it's individuals, you and I, who are actually going to suffer, not Goshen, who is here because of tax credits in part, and Marshall, and all of these other businesses, clean energy sector businesses, nothing clean about it. All of them, they're the ones that want the tax credits. But hey, it's the individuals. Simply put, the House Republicans' plan would be catastrophic for our economy, our energy security, and our national security. They're proposing to endanger the health of Americans and undo our clean energy progress as a ransom for not triggering a catastrophic default. Now, I highlighted endanger the health of Americans because they're consistently linking health to climate. It's part of the psychological warfare that they're doing, because the health scare that we've had these last 3 years was so powerful and it worked so well. Like, it's unbelievable how well it worked to them. I can imagine in their circles, like, oh, it just went to plan. And now people are pushing back on climate lockdowns. But if you can psychologically put in there that the climate lockdowns are for your health, then it's justified because it worked the last 3 years for your health. We locked you down for your health. So that's why I highlighted that. They just look out for that. They are trying to bring health and climate and blur the lines in our psyche. Right now, we're in the midst of a climate crisis, one that demands that we build clean energy. We can do it in a way that protects ecosystems and communities, creates good-paying jobs, makes our nation more competitive, and saves our planet. Here's the bottom line. If we can't build some new things in a few backyards, the climate crisis will destroy everyone's backyards, along with the livelihoods, communities, wildlife, and biodiversity we all want to protect. And it's in bold. Can you imagine if we can't build some of the things in a few backyards? It's just so insulting and condescending. How about we put the wind turbines in your backyard, Podesta? Oh, yeah, that's probably because you have a mansion on some ocean front somewhere. Drives me nuts. The general tactic used by the opponents of projects, delay it until it goes away, is in effect a form of climate denial. Those aren't my words. It's what Bill McKibben, one of our nation's leading environmentalists, wrote in Mother Jones last month. I looked into this individual, of course, connected to the World Economic Forum. Got invited, I think, gets talked about positively by all of the people who believe in the climate scam. So I don't really care about what he has to say. He's a liar too. But anyway, the general tactic used by opponents of projects, delay until it goes away, is in effect a form of climate denial. So if you don't want solar panels and wind turbines in your backyard, you are a climate denier. You're denying that climate exists. Okay? In case you didn't know, that's Podesta. He then said, when you're in emergency, acting at least gives you a chance. Not acting guarantees an outcome, and not a good one. It's time that we confront crisis with pragmatism. To go from stopping things to building things again. And with pragmatic, bipartisan action from Congress, we'll build a secure, resilient, affordable, and clean energy future together. Yeah. Once again, one of the most evil people that are walking around right now, free, needs to be held accountable for everything he's done. This came out October 31st. The man says, do you think people will comply with climate lockdowns? I would like to think not, but everybody I know fell for the first lockdown. That is a wonderful question. And unfortunately, I think the same people that really fell hard for it the first time will fall for this one as well. In fact, somebody I know said something about how clean the air was when we were locked down. So people that really truly believe in we're all going to die or something if we don't switch over, like they drink the Kool-Aid, I guess you'd say, or they're in the Matrix. Those individuals, yes, they want to be locked down. They don't mind whatsoever. In fact, that same couple was, after almost a year of being locked down here in Michigan, was like, no, we should stay locked down longer. I'm like, are you insane? Like, small businesses have already been demolished. Like, I don't understand. However, I do think a lot of people have awakened since the last lockdowns. But I don't know. What do you do? Do not comply, obviously. But what if they use their government fists, the police force? You know, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. What do you think? Do you think that people are going to comply this time? So this is President Biden announces $5 billion to support rural communities during investing in Rural America event series. During the visit that he was doing throughout America, President Biden will announce over $5 billion in new investments from Investing in America agenda, including the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, to advance rural prosperity, economic development, competition, and sustainability. Biden will also discuss how Bidenomics and his Investing in America agenda are ensuring rural Americans do not have to leave their hometowns to find opportunity. Ah, yes, we don't want you to leave your house, let alone your hometown. $1.7 billion in investments in climate-smart agriculture. Once again, I have to reiterate that the government doesn't make any money, it steals it from the people. So they stole $1.7 billion and they're going to invest it in climate-smart agriculture. And I've been trying to memorize, it's like surveillance, monitoring, and recording technology, something like that. There's an acronym out there. Now, of course, they claim that's not really what it means, but it fits, so it doesn't really matter what they intended. That's what it is. It's surveillance, monitoring, and recording. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is announcing nearly $1.7 billion in funding to support the adoption of climate-smart agriculture practices, which have a direct climate mitigation benefit, advance a host of other environmental co-benefits, and offer farmers, ranchers, and foresters new revenue streams. The government, since Obama, has been involved in farming, and government shouldn't be involved in any of this crap. You know, it's supposed to be like this big, not as big as it is. Dutch Creek Farms, where President Biden will visit today, is a family farm that grows corn and soybeans and raises hogs. Under the Biden-Harris administration, Dutch Creek Farms has used several climate-smart agriculture techniques to make their farm more sustainable, including growing crops that naturally sequester carbon and improve soil quality, farming in a way that limits soil disturbance, and creating riparian buffers to protect nearby waterways from pollutants. Again, they're just changing the way farmers do business or the way they farm. I don't think that the government should be involved in farming, and Russia happened, tens of millions of people starved when the government got involved in the food supply chain. So we all know that food shortages are coming. We should by now. It's already started in New York, by the way. If you haven't seen Cash Jordan on YouTube, I highly recommend his channel. He talks about real estate in New York City, and he knows what's up. It's a very good informational source, rather, because of course, if it happens in New York, it will spread everywhere else if we allow it. So this goes on $1.1 billion in rural American infrastructure, across 104 loan and grant awards. So $1.1 billion and only 104 loan and grant awards. I'm not good at math. I could just pull out a calculator, but 1.1 billion divided by 104. That doesn't seem like a lot of people getting that money, in my opinion. This funding includes $5 million from the Inflation Reduction Act to further increase availability of renewable homegrown biofuels. $2 billion in investment to partner with rural communities to create jobs and support rural-led economic development. It's announcing $2 billion across 99 economic development projects in Rural Partners Network (RPN) communities in 9 states and Puerto Rico. Funding that will create jobs, build infrastructure, as well as increase access to quality healthcare, affordable housing, and clean water and energy. The man says, "I think Stockholm Syndrome is very real. The Matrix has such a strong grip on people." I agree. There are more people that would not comply this time around, but I think there are still a majority of people. I think you're right. But I'm willing to be proven wrong, you know? I have hope for the future, and, you know, maybe something will, slap them awake. You never know. $274 million to expand critical rural high-speed internet infrastructure. So $274 million for his Reconnect program, which provided $65 billion to ensure every American has access to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. So they already gave $65 billion, and now they're giving $274 million more. In total, the Biden-Harris administration is investing $90 billion to deliver affordable, high-speed internet to everyone in America, including rural communities that often lack access to high-speed internet. $90 billion of our money I just think the free market, let it reign. If an area doesn't have internet, and the market wasn't a monopoly as it is, regulated as it is, we could have internet spread out faster. This top-down approach is never, never good for the people. All right, now we're going to get into this because this was very interesting to me. Blaze Media, this was all the way back in 2011. Does the new White House Rural Council equal Agenda 21, United Nations Agenda 21? Now, personally, what's his name? Glenn Beck. I think that he does a lot of good work. However, he's somebody that cannot be 100% trusted, in my opinion. Now, again, I watch his videos, but there's definitely something connecting him with a lot of other people in the government, but I'm not going to get into that. This article is very good, so we're going to read it. President Obama's EO 13575 is designed to begin taking control over almost all aspects of the lives of 16% of the American people. Why didn't we notice it? Wienergate. In the middle of the Anthony Weiner scandal, as the press and most of the American people were distracted, President Obama created something called the White House Rural Council. Section 1 goes as follows. 60% of American population lives in rural counties. Strong, sustainable rural communities are essential to winning the future and ensuring American competitiveness in the years ahead. These communities supply our food, fiber, and energy, safeguard our natural resources, and are essential in the development of science and innovation. Though rural communities face numerous challenges, they also present enormous economic potential. The federal government has an important role to play in order to expand access to the capital necessary for economic growth, promote innovation, improve access to health care and education, and expand outdoor recreational activities on public lands. Warning bells should have sounded all across rural America when the phrase sustainable rural communities came up. As we know from researching the UN Plan for Sustainable Development, known as Agenda 21, these are code words for the true fundamental transformation America. The third sentence also makes it quite clear that the government intends to take greater control over food, fiber, and energy. Oh, and they sure did, didn't they? They sure took control of food, fiber, and energy. The last sentence in Section 1 further clarifies the intent of the order by tying together access to the capital necessary for economic growth, healthcare, and education. The new White House Rural Council will probably be populated by experts in the various fields that might prove helpful to the folks who live and work outside of large urban areas, right? Well, Tom Vilsack, the current Secretary of Agriculture, will chair the group. But let us review the list of members appointed to serve on the new council according to the order the heads of the following groups have been appointed. And so you see Treasury, Defense, Justice, Interior, Commerce, Labor, all of them. I mean, look at how big our government is. How did we let this happen, y'all? How? It appears that not a single department in the federal government was excluded from the new White House Rural Council. And the wildcard option in number 25 gives the president and the agriculture secretary the option to designate anyone to serve on this powerful council. So number 25, the White House Office of Cabinet Affairs, and such other executive branch department agencies and offices as the president or secretary of agriculture may from time to time designate. Right. So as they create new government, bigger government, new departments, they can add them. They just left an open clause. Within the 25 designated members of the council are some curious ties to Agenda 21 and the structure being built to implement it. Valerie Jarrett from the White House Office of Public Engagement and Intergovernmental Affairs served on the board of something called Local Initiative Support Corporation. LISC uses the language of Agenda 21 and ICLEI as their webpage details their work to build sustainable communities. Yes, Ickly Cities. I don't know if you guys have seen my 3-part series on Grand Rapids, but it being an Ickly City, definitely going the sustainable development route with the surveillance state. Hilda Solis from the Labor Department in 2000 received an award for her work on environmental justice. Nancy Sutley, head of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, served on the board of Los Angeles' Metropolitan Water District and was one of the biggest supporters of low-flow toilets that are now credited with costing more money than expected while causing some nasty problems. Yeah, I thankfully don't have that problem with the toilet, but again, the wash machine situation, they regulate the water and make it so low that it doesn't really wash your clothes very well, so then you have to do it twice or rinse twice because it won't rinse very well because it's not enough water. And so these regulations are inefficient and cost more money. Is it possible? And it costs us more money in several ways, obviously. It makes wash machines even more expensive because they have all these regulations that they have to abide by that don't even help anything. Is it possible that concerns about 13575 are just typical anti-government paranoia? Let us review the mission and function of the White House RC, Rural Commission. Mission and function of the Council. The Council shall work across executive departments, agencies, and offices to coordinate development of policy recommendations, to promote economic prosperity and quality of life in rural America, and shall coordinate my administration's engagement with rural communities. Economic prosperity and a better quality of life, that all sounds fairly innocent and well-intentioned. But continuing deeper into the order, we find the Council is charged with 4 directives. Make recommendations to the President through the Director of the Domestic Policy Council and the Director of the National Economic Council on streamlining and leveraging federal investments in rural areas, where appropriate, to increase the impact of federal dollars and create economic opportunities to improve the quality of life in rural America. Again, we moved to the country because we don't want an EV battery plant in our backyard. We don't want solar panels, and we want the woods. That's why you move to the country, or you want to farm and be self-sustaining, self-reliant. The vague language here sounds non-threatening, but is there a hint here that a rural stimulus plan might be in the making? Will the federal government start pumping money into farmlands under the guise of creating economic opportunities to improve the quality of life in rural America? It is difficult to discern as the language is so broad. Well, now we know because it's been 12 years later. And yes, that's exactly what's happening. We continue with the functions. Coordinate and increase the effectiveness of federal engagement with rural stakeholders, including agricultural organizations, small businesses, education and training institutions, healthcare providers, telecommunications service providers, research and land grant institutions, law enforcement, state, local, and tribal governments, and non-governmental organizations regarding the needs of rural America. Virtually every aspect of rural life seems to now be part of the government's mission. And while all of the items in B sound like typical government speak, you should be alarmed when you read the words non-governmental organizations, NGOs. NGOs are unelected, but typically government-funded groups that act like embedded community organizers, and NGOs are key to the Agenda 21's plans. Pretty sure that the Muskegon River Watershed Assembly, that's an NGO. And again, funded by us through Eagle grants, and yet not accountable to us. It's just so perfect for central government. Coordinated federal efforts directed toward the growth and development of geographic regions that encompass both urban and rural areas. That one sounds very similar to the language found in the United Nations plans for sustainable cities known as Agenda 21. Managing the population in both rural and urban areas with a focus on controlling open spaces. And identify and facilitate rural economic opportunities associated with energy development, outdoor recreation, and other conservation-related activities. This function of Executive Order 13575 ties energy development with outdoor recreation and other conservation-related activities. When did outdoor recreation become a conservation-related activity? This is where you get the Wildlands project. Aside from the content of this order and some its vague intentions, the timing of the signing should be considered. Later this month, Washington, D.C. is hosting a meeting of the Agenda 21 operatives who are members of ICLEI. ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, and U.S. Green Building Council. That's probably who is creating the new building code. Today announced the launch of the National Press Club Leadership Speaker Series to be held on June 28th. The event's inaugural key speakers will be the Honorable Zhu Kang, Secretary General of the United States Conference of Sustainable Development, whose keynote address, The Road to Rio +20, will explain the role of key global and national stakeholders and the impact and vision of its historic conference. We all know in 2015, Obama solidified the relationship between the United Nations and America. So thanks, Obama. The United Nations has pushed their Sustainable Development Program for almost 20 years. The UN's Social Justice Blueprint, called Agenda 21, requires governments to control almost all aspects of an individual's life, but has recently met with substantial resistance in America. Since the Blaze covered this topic, and the story appeared in Glenn Beck's program, we have been inundated with reports from around the country about the effort to remove ICLEI and Agenda from local governments. So 2011 is when Rosa Koire was out on the scene. She released her book. She actually did an interview with Glenn Beck. And so I do thank Glenn Beck for that, for getting Rosa Koire's message out there and trying. That's pretty cool. This is a bunch of different things that are, going on that are Agenda 21, like back in 2011. There appears to be a developing grassroots movement to reject projects like Agenda 21. It remains to be seen if these groups might also reject a Washington-based control over rural lands, like the council created by Executive Order 13575. As long as there's not another Wienergate, maybe they'll notice. What's really funny is that I'm pretty sure that the Wienergate is how the emails that John Podesta are in were released through WikiLeaks, was through Anthony Weiner's laptop. So they're all connected. They're all connected. This document is really quite long, as you can tell, so I am going to stick with the highlighted portions for the most part, but if you're interested, as always, the links are going to be down in the description so you can research more yourself. Come down here, provides an overview of key flexibilities. Several key federal agencies have published rural fact sheets that highlight how to leverage agency resources and capabilities to help rural communities. I guess just indicating that the government is, taking control over all of this. Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which $42 billion from program at Department of Commerce, which is administrated by the telecommunications. Yeah, okay. Lots of money. Reconnect program, $1.9 billion to the Reconnect program for the Department of Agriculture, which offers grants, loans, and other funds directly to states, territories, local governments, tribes, cooperatives, nonprofits, and certain for-profit entities to build infrastructure and install equipment. Let's see, digital equity grants. The first program, State Digital Equity Planning, is a $60 million formula grant program for states and territories to develop digital equity plans. So there's your DEI, DIE. I'd say DIE because die needs to die, and it's also in order of when they were introduced to society. Equity was the last thing. Diversity and inclusion were both introduced in the 60s, and equity in the last 15 years. Tribal Connectivity Broadband Program. Commerce's NTIA will administer an additional $2 billion in funds to tribal governments to be used for broadband deployment on tribal lands, as well as for telehealth, distance learning, broadband affordability, and digital inclusion. So, unfortunately, for the people of the tribes, you are not excluded. You have to be included you're not to be left behind either. So whether you wanted to be left behind or not, you get no choice. Affordable Connectivity Program, administered by the FCC, provides eligible lower-income households with a discount of up to $30 per month or $75 per month on tribal lands. So this I have highlighted because a lot of the Democrats that are pushing this FCC takeover of the internet through, they are saying that we need to know, we need to support this, and we need to support it soon by the beginning of 2024, because otherwise these people will not have internet anymore because we're not giving them the money. So they're putting pressure on making it a rush job, all in the name of $30 per month or $75 per month on tribal lands for people. So they're trying to say poor people are going to suffer if you don't do it, but poor people, everybody will suffer if they do, if the FCC actually takes over. Here are the brownfields right here, $1.5 billion. So again, the company destroys the land, we pay for it. The FAST Act. This program provides capital planning and operating assistance to states to support public transportation in rural areas with a population less than 50,000. Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. Again, they're not going to leave us alone, and they're going to try to create these corridors, which I'm about to get into. But there is one thing I really need to right here. So, Grand Rapids and Maui transportation. Both of them, the Vision Zero and the Road to Zero Coalition. So, safe streets and roads for all. This is part of the infrastructure bill. In fiscal year 2022, the bipartisan infrastructure law invests $1 billion in the new and first of its kind Safe Streets and Roads for All program. Will fund local efforts to reduce roadway crashes and fatalities through grants for planning and projects, especially for people who walk and bike who are disproportionately impacted by crashes. These funds will support existing safety efforts as well as establish new local data-driven efforts to reverse trends comparable to similar safety-oriented plans and programs such as Vision Zero and the Road to Zero Coalition. So, have that highlighted. I'm going to show you this really quick. When I did my Maui video, I highly recommend you check it out. But in it, it says quite often that pedestrians and bicyclists are, they need to be safe and not hit by cars. It's all an excuse me. It's an anti-car message. It's to make it so that you don't want to even have your own car because they don't want you to. So this is just showing the Vision Zero initiative is in the Maui 2040 Long Range Transportation Plan. And you come over here and City of Grand Rapids, Vision Zero, they started that campaign in 2018. If you go to any transportation plan for any state, guarantee you something very similar to Vision Zero or, safety, road safety for pedestrians and cyclists is a big deal. And that's all part of that 15-minute city push. Public notice posting of state and territory BEAD and digital equity plans and proposals. So I'm showing you this so that you can see your action plan no matter what state you're in. So this shows the BEAD 5-year action plan, the draft digital equity plans, and the draft BEAD initial proposals for every state is here. And of course, look at that, August 15th, public comment period. So it just closed for our digital equity plan. I will be looking into both of these. If I find stuff that's worthy of sharing with you guys, which probably there is stuff in there, I will do a video on it in the future, but not at this time. So if you're interested for yourself, it'll be down in the comments below. This came out November 9th of 2023, and it's the Admin Celebrates Historic Progress in Rebuilding America ahead of the 2-year anniversary. Again, not going to go through all of it because it's basically saying the exact same thing as all the other ones. This one shows some of the stuff that they've done and that they're proud of. None of it is too egregious in here. I mean, it's your typical regional clean hydrogen hubs, $50 billion of public and private sector investment. Financed 1,200 drinking water and wastewater projects across the country, including projects that replace hundreds of thousands of lead service lines. Again, I don't trust them to do this, and I worry for our water. Funded nearly 400 projects for water recycling, storage, conservation, desalination, and other purposes to improve drought resilience across the West. And awarded funding to 70 previously unfunded Superfund projects, clearing a long-standing backlog of projects to clean up contaminated sites and advance environmental justice. Whatever that means. I don't think it's environmental justice for me to be cleaning up after Ford's contaminated sites, or GM, or whoever. Insert Amazon. Insert industry here. Accomplishment across key sectors, roads and bridges, but this one, rail. The bipartisan structure invests $66 billion for rail, the largest investment in passenger rail since the inception of Amtrak, and an unprecedented investment in rail safety. The man says, when I tell people about GR being constructed as a 15-minute smart city, the response is like, yeah, sounds pretty awesome to me. We are getting a soccer stadium. Yes, I know. It's because people don't really understand, though, what it means to be a 15-minute city, I think. You know, it does sound very convenient to have bike lanes and, to have a nice, clean city would be great. But little do you know that it's basically a smart city. Maybe we should say that. Instead of a 15-minute city, we should say a smart city. Because I think a lot of people are starting to be aware that smart is not necessarily good. You have a smart meter, it can be controlled remotely by your energy company. Not good. So I'm not quite sure if 15-minute city is the right way to say it. Maybe we should say smart city. Since Biden took office, Amtrak has upgraded 29 stations to full Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, and 30 more stations will be made accessible in the next year to ensure that all passengers can access Amtrak service. President Biden also recently announced $16.4 billion for 25 passenger rail projects on the Northeast Corridor to repair aging infrastructure, reducing delays, and improving reliability and speed. This includes the Hudson River Tunnel in New York, where the Biden admin has committed $11 billion to build a new tunnel to serve 200,000 daily passengers between New York and New Jersey, and the Frederick Douglass Tunnel in Baltimore, which will replace a 150-year-old tunnel and will create good-paying union jobs to do so. On the national network, the Department of Transportation has made another $4.6 billion available through federal, state, and national program to expand rail service outside the Northeast Corridor. And then it goes into airports, ports, and waterways. There's nothing that's left unturned. This is literally like the New Deal with FDR. That's what we're dealing with. Let's see, I have several more things to share, but I'm going to skip some of these. Let's see, this is the bipartisan infrastructure law supports $580 million investment to fulfill Indian water rights settlements. So this says water is a sacred source, and water rights are crucial to ensuring the safety, health, and empowerment of tribal communities. Through this funding, the Interior Department will continue to uphold their trust responsibilities, ensure the tribal communities receive the water resources they have long been promised. I am grateful that tribes, some of whom have been waiting for this funding for decades, are finally getting the resources they are owed with the help of this crucial funding from the infrastructure law. And then this is the other thing. The Reclamation Water Settlement Fund was created by Congress in 2009 and receives $120 million in mandatory funding annually from 2020 through 2029. So I don't get why it was created in 2009, but they don't start getting the funding until 2020. Did they know? Of course they did. About 2020, the Great Reset in 2009. again. Of course they did. This has been planned for a while, but 2001, actually, I often say 2008 was the beginning of the Great Reset, but 2001 really, with the Patriot Act, you could say that was the beginning of the end of America. Here's what rural leaders say communities need. Again, not going through all of it. This came out September 13th. The report includes policy recommendations divided into 4 key pillars focused on a host of issues that contributors said are critical to the success of rural communities, including economic policy, rural healthcare, education, and climate policy. The 4 pillars: protect people's freedom to live and work safely and without discrimination. The report calls for protecting democracy, of course, and access to voting by passing the For the People Act, which would reduce the influence of big money in politics, ban partisan gerrymandering, strengthen ethic rules for public servants, and implement other anti-corruption measures for the purpose of fortifying our democracy. The group also called on lawmakers to make it easier to vote by mail and to restore the voting rights of formerly incarcerated people. Now, I have that highlighted because Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist II, who is a young global leader for the World Economic Forum, just bragged about how they cleared a bunch of formerly incarcerated people's history. Just completely cleared it. Boop. I think like millions of people. Or I should look it up just to be safe, but I shared it in yesterday's video. So they are actively trying to get it so that people that have felonies and such can vote. You can, make whatever guess you want on why that is, but ultimately, you're not supposed to vote if you have a felony. The report expresses support for the Fairness of Farm Workers Act, which would give farm workers equal rights to overtime pay and minimum wage standards, and the Child Labor Exploitation Accountability Act, which would ensure U.S. Department of Agriculture contractors comply with labor laws, expand child labor laws to independent contractors, and increase penalties for child labor law violations. I don't agree with that at all, obviously. I think that children, one of the reasons why we have 20-year-olds right now as we speak acting like children is because they weren't given any responsibility their entire life and they have no idea how the world works. And so I think that it's actually good for children to work on a farm. And this to me sounds like they're not going to be able to, because it will, right now they can, but they are going to be, let's see, it says we give farm workers equal rights to overtime pay and minimum wage standards and Child Labor Exploitation Accountability Act. So right now they don't have these minimum wage standards, which is really good for farmers, obviously. Really quick, I worked at Starbucks. You could not work over 40 hours a week. I might have said this to you guys already. I'm sorry if I repeat. Sometimes I can't remember what stories I have shared and what ones that I'd like to share. But working at Starbucks, we could not get it was against the rules for anybody to work over 40 hours a week. So let's say we have 25 people total that work for the store. 6 or 7 of them actually want to work. The rest of them, not really. And so they call out all the time. Now, the 6 or 7 people that want to work, they can't work anymore because they've already done their 40 hours. So now I'm sitting here with only 3 people on the floor when I should have 6, because the only people that want to work can't work because they would go and time and a half, and Starbucks refuses to pay time and a half. So it doesn't help. It screws over the worker. That's what I'm saying. It screwed me over as the shift supervisor. It screwed over everybody that worked with me because, again, the people that wanted to work couldn't. It further calls on the government to provide more opportunities for Black farmers, recognize Native nations, and honor treaties. Provide rural communities that have been victims of pollution with legal pathways to hold polluters accountable, increase investments in counties with persistently high poverty rates, and restore access to abortion care nationwide. I can't stand when they do this. It's like climate denier, abortion care. There's nothing caring about abortion. The man says, so thankful I worked as a farmhand from 14 to 20. I always said kids should grow up with farm experience. Yeah, I mean, and when they lived in the city, it would be they would, carry mail or letters from one businessman to another or sell newspapers. You make connections that way. You learn about people that way. Like there's a lot to learn for children to be involved. And again, now people don't work until 18. Even then, a lot of them don't. So I am not, obviously, I don't want, children to be working in factory assembly lines or something for 10 hours a day or anything like that. But I think that the government being involved is a no go. All right. I have just too many things here. I'm going to have to skip some stuff. I will leave all of the things that I have to skip down below in the description, and I will just say had to skip on there. So if you want to look at them, you are more than welcome. We're going to, hopefully this will work. We're going to watch this individual. We're going back to the FCC now. I wanted to make sure everyone knew about the rural plan, but here is what's happening with the FCC. This came out November 30th, so just a couple days ago. And this is Carr, the individual that I read his comment. I don't think it's the same one, so we'll see.
But in the 5 months since that last hearing, the Biden administration has pressed the FCC to break hard left, and it has. The Biden administration has put ideology over smart policy. Indeed, almost 3 years into this administration, a clear pattern has emerged. The Biden administration's entire approach to the internet, its broadband agenda, if you will, can be boiled down to one word: control. You can see it in the administration's call for Title II internet regulation. You can see it in the administration's campaign to pressure social media companies to censor political speech. You can see it in the administration's decision to use BEAD to preference government-run networks. And you can see it in the administration's demand.
I didn't even know that. So BEAD, yeah, that makes government business. Yeah, what did he say? I'm going to rewind that real quick.
And you can see it in the administration's demand that the FCC adopt digital equity government-run networks.
Okay, government-run networks.
And you can see it in the administration's demand that the FCC adopt digital equity rules for the internet. None of these decisions are isolated ones. They all share and advance the same goal of increasing government control. I'll focus today on Title II and its fraternal twin, digital equity. 6 years ago, Americans lived through one of the greatest hoaxes in regulatory history. They were told the FCC's 2017 decision to reverse Title II would literally break the internet. It was a viral disinformation campaign replete with requisite doses of Orwellian wordplay. CNN proclaimed the end of the internet as we know it. Others predicted that you'll get the internet one word at a time. Activists said that prices would spike, you'd be charged per website you visited, and the internet itself would slow down. Did any of those predictions come to pass? Of course not. Since 2017, broadband speeds in the US are up 6-fold. Prices are down, competition has intensified, and record-breaking new broadband builds have brought millions across the digital divide. In other words, Title II was never about improving your online experience. That was just the sheep's clothing. It was always about control. And the Biden administration has made clear that it wants that control back. Just last month, the administration built on its Title II dictate by urging the FCC to adopt a sweeping new digital equity plan. The FCC complied. President Biden's plan gives the federal government a roving mandate to micromanage nearly every aspect of how the internet functions. It hands the administrative state veto power over every decision about the provision of internet service. And it sweeps entire industries within the FCC's jurisdiction for the first time. Congress never authorized any of this. Indeed, Senator Collins, the lead Republican negotiator on the underlying bill, described it as a, quote, regulatory overreach. She said, quote, it clearly goes well beyond the authority Congress provided.
That, again, was Carr. He is the commissioner for the FCC. Surprise, surprise, in a last-minute edit, the Biden admin secured an exemption from the government's new digital equity rule for itself, which I don't know if you guys have heard that they also excluded themselves from getting the jab. Yeah, that's right. The Biden admin does not want to be bound by the requirements of the digital equity law that it called on the FCC to impose. Does the Biden admin want to engage in digital discrimination? Does it not want to promote digital equity? It is obvious to everyone what is going on here. It's not about discrimination, it's about control, once again. So I'm not going to read the entire thing. If you want to pause it, I'll have it up there for you to read. Biden's admin for internet infrastructure sweeping regulatory. So come down here. Last month, Biden gave the FCC its marching orders. The president called on the FCC to implement a one-page section. For the first time ever, those rules would give the federal government a roving mandate. Yes. Talk about central planning. All right. Not trying to reiterate the same point. It's just so many articles I have. It's crazy. Biden FCC moves to put new DEI controls over the internet. Ignoring the warnings of the Senate Republic this week, his FCC, is pushing forward with DEI agenda to take control of the internet under the guise of a fringe left-wing legal theory about discrimination. Despite admitting there's little to no evidence of discrimination by telecommunications companies, Democrats are hoping to convince American people that broadband internet is so racist they need to plow ahead with a government-mandated affirmative action and race-based pricing. The only beneficiaries of this Orwellian equity plan are overzealous government regulators who want to control the internet. So equity is equal outcomes. So how does that work? If you are in a certain area or if you have a certain skin color, you will be able to get money from the government in order to equal out. Other people can pay, but they can't. I don't really get how equity is going to come into play. How do you get equal outcomes when it comes to the internet? That's what I'm trying to ask. How? Cruz had led 27 state Republican letters to Rosenworcel, warning against the vote later last week to authorize the Biden DEI initiative at the FCC, but she ignored it, his office lamented. Your draft order, which largely follows a Biden admin dictate? I didn't know that's not how it's spelled. What are you doing? Will create crippling uncertainty for the U.S. broadband industry, chill broadband investment, and undermine Congress' objective of promoting broadband access for all Americans. We urge you to adhere to the will of the Congress and conform to the plain meaning of Section 60506 to avoid causing serious damage to the competitive and innovative U.S. broadband industry. The group also said the FCC were seeking expansive new authority over virtually every aspect of the marketplace. It's not about discrimination, it's about control. The move will stifle innovation. Biden's pronounced efforts to extend government control over the expansive tech landscape point to an unprecedented level of government interventions in Americans' digital lives and basic freedoms. Consolidation of power over the tech space within the government, working in tandem with its corporate allies in big tech, will stifle innovation, freedom of speech, and freedom of association. Diversity of ideas and technological advancements will suffer. Very concerning, again, for freedom of speech. Obviously, a lot of the stuff I say would probably be against the rules. Just like Rosa Corey said, the fact that in America right now, people are afraid to speak their opinion, that shows how far we've come down the commie road. Communitarianism or communism, whichever one you want to look at or imagine we're going towards. It's the same concept. This will give what to know about the FCC's latest action, digital discrimination. This rulemaking seeks to address alleged digital discrimination in the broadband marketplace to ensure equal access to broadband across income level, race, ethnicity, color, religion, and national origin. So even if you're an illegal immigrant, you should be able to have internet. Is that what that's saying? While everyone opposes intentional discrimination, the FCC embraced a legally questionable and erroneous impact standard where a business can be held liable for legitimate business and deployment decisions, even if they did not intend to discriminate. Title II reclassification would cause broadband to be regulated under the same 1930s era public utility framework for legacy telephone networks. If upheld, it would allow the FCC to exercise extraordinary powers over nearly every aspect of broadband and empower the FCC to pick and choose which sections of Title II to apply to broadband, making the Commission a de facto legislator. Tons of power. All right. I need to talk about the Wildlands project because we talked about the corridors, and this is absolutely a part of that. So we come down here, the Wildlands project. The strategies used to remove the landowner from his land include but are not limited to, denying water. I'm sorry, there's a lot here. Let me see if I can find corridor. Yeah, all right. We're coming to it. So I wanted to really quickly, I want to throw this in here because when we're talking about leasing your land, farmland, to the government for wind and solar, this is what happens. When a land trust purchases private property rights from a landowner for promises from the landowner to do certain environmentally friendly things, in return, the landowner and his heirs are then able to stay on the land in perpetuity. Unfortunately, over time, the land trust may make more and more environmental demands on the landowner until the landowner can no longer make a living off the land. With all the restrictions placed on the property, no one but the government may be willing to buy it. These agreements are called conservation easements. Sorry, got something itching my eye. President Obama has greatly advanced the locking down of rural America through Executive Order 13575 with its far-reaching consequences. So again, thanks Obama. He laid the foundation for Biden. He laid the foundation. Executive Order 13575, which was signed in 2011, created the White House Rural Council. This council requires every federal agency in the U.S. to oversee all food, fiber, and energy needs for all rural sustainable communities. Across the U.S., this EO affects 16% of the population. Now, here are the corridors. The human free land that connects the cores are called corridors. We're spending some time discussing some of the key plans of those that push sustainable agenda. In a very large area, usually at least 5,000 acres of land can be free of human activity, then a core area can be created there. This is where the large predators like wolves, cougars, grizzly bears, etc. have been or will be reintroduced. The human-free land that connects the cores are called corridors. Around the corridors and cores are buffer zones. As the carnivore population increases, it may become necessary to enlarge the core area and consequently also the buffer zones. This planning for where to relocate humans in order to create the cores, corridors, and buffer zones began in the U.S. several decades ago. We know this because in 1994, the U.S. Senate was scheduled to ratify the Biodiversity Treaty. During that year, Michael Kaufman pounded the Capitol with emails. This individual, I believe, was involved with American policy, Tom DeWeese, and they stopped this from being implemented officially, but still being implemented, though, unfortunately. The Senate Majority Leader took the treaty off the calendar and it was never ratified. Who says one person can't make a difference? They definitely postponed it. So this is what we're looking at. All this red right here are core reserves and corridors. Let's see, can I make it bigger? Here we go. So you can see core reserves and corridors, little to no human use, and then buffer zones, normal use, Indian reservations, and military reservations. So right now they are working heavily on the Snake River, which is up here, I believe, and Arizona and Colorado. So these are what they're working on first. And this is all no humans in these red areas, wildlife only. Again, this might not happen. I obviously hope it doesn't happen, but there we go. But they're certainly trying. So here's another one. Oh, you can't really see it. Does all the foregoing mean the Wild Earth and Wildlands Project advocate the end of industrial civilization? Most assuredly. Now, let me go back one paragraph. This kind of land acquisition is occurring all over the globe in order to prepare the world for, as Al Gore said, the retching transformation of society. Or, stated more clearly by John Davis, editor of Wild Earth magazine, does all the foregoing mean that Wild Earth and the Wildland Project advocate the end of industrial civilization? Most assuredly. In summary, since the founding of this country, it has been known that man cannot be free without the ability to own property. The proponents of UN Agenda 21 understand very well ownership of land provides wealth and security to those who control it. A government that denies land ownership to its citizens is unknowingly reducing its citizenry to little more than serfs dependent on the government for every need. Never forget that Agenda 21 is not an environmental movement. It is a political movement designed to control all of mankind's behavior, and that only by taking our property away from us can Agenda 21 be successful. So when you see anything about corridors, know that that's the Wildlands Project. They just won't say it's the Wildlands Project because there are a small group of people that understand that the Wildlife Project means 15-minute cities. Because if you're not allowed on some land, you got to be somewhere, right? I mean, you could be 6 foot under. They love that too. But corridor ecology, what is it? And what does it mean today? So this is out of Pew. My first book was on corridor ecology, how wildlife moves from one place to another back in the 90s, of course. We started to care about wildlife corridors because the technology had really changed. For the first time ever, we were able to put GPS collars on animals and see how far they traveled. So it's all in the name of predators, of course. Can you tell more about overpass and underpasses that help animals get safely across busy roads? So when they talk about your infrastructure, your roadways and such, and they talk about corridors, they're talking about these overpasses and underpasses that need to be built as well for the wildlife. Wildlife crossings are different from a standard bridge. They have a berm of dirt on either side with trees that allow the wildlife to go through the middle. This creates a quiet and secluded path for animals who might be sensitive to humans and to cars. While they're less noticeable than the overpasses, there are underpasses that go underneath the road too. As a scientist, what excites you most about the future of this conservation? It is exciting that as of summer 2020, we now have globally agreed upon connectivity guidelines for the world. The United States and Canada are also both considering corridor legislation at the national level, and these guidelines may help guide that decision-making. And we're already seeing countries moving forward with legislation. Tanzania, for example, recently passed wildlife corridor legislation to conserve animals like wildebeests. And there have been many accomplishments, though we aren't done yet. At Y2Y, we have worked with different partners and governments in the US and Canada to increase protected areas from Yellowstone to Yukon by over 50%, with 116 overpasses and underpasses for wildlife to get safely across. Once again, the West is going first. And the Appalachians, though, there's tons of money going to the Appalachian Mountains and all those individuals to make sure they're not left behind. The world sees the importance of ecosystem connectivity, in part not just for wildlife, but also because of climate change. As ecosystems are beginning to shift, one of the top recommendations by climate scientists is to ensure that wildlife, as well as plants, can move freely and maintain connectivity. It's not only important to plan where protected areas go, but also ensure animals and plants can move between them. So again, protected areas, human-free. It's all connected, and it makes it difficult to give you all the information that I really want to give you. This will be the last chunk that I'm going to be able to go over today. Biden-Harris administration announced new investments to improve measurement, monitoring, reporting, and verification of greenhouse gas emissions through President Biden's Investing in America agenda. Why is this important? Because starting in the beginning of 2024, Amazon, the biggest, obviously, is going to start implementing the carbon footprint tracker. And this is why Biden-Harris are working with the public-private partnerships, right? So Agricultural Secretary Tom Vilsack today announced the U.S. Department of Agriculture will invest $300 million through President Biden's Investing in America agenda to improve the monitoring of greenhouse gas emissions and carbon sequestration and climate-smart agriculture and forestry. The Inflation Reduction Act provided nearly $20 billion of taxpayer money in overall investments to advance climate-smart agriculture and forestry practices. Today's announcement and the broader federal strategy will support the effective implementation of these climate conservation investments and help further President Biden's bold goal of achieving 50 to 52% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, compared to 2005 levels. Since day one, the Biden-Harris administration has taken bold steps in climate-smart agriculture by making programs as strong and effective as possible. To do this, we have to improve the scientific backbone of our programs. Trust the science. This new investment by USDA in improving data and measurement of greenhouse gas emissions, made possible through President Biden's Investing in America agenda, is unmatched in its scope and potential to increase accuracy, reduce uncertainty, and enhance overall confidence in these estimates. We're data-driven, of course you are, and we seek continuous improvement in our climate-smart agriculture and forestry efforts. Unmatched in scope. Today's USDA announcement of $300 million from the Inflation Reduction Act to measure and verify emissions from those sectors is a big step in the right direction. It's going to demolish small business. Like, when it's implemented, that will be the result. Because, again, how is Weeby's a Party Store supposed to track the supply chain carbon footprint? They're supposed to spend a bunch of money on that data collecting technology? Farmers and ranchers are on the front lines of the climate crisis. They sure are, aren't they? And more committed than ever to delivering solutions that protect and enhance our land and waters. You know what they want to protect? Their livelihood. You know why there are so many people that are so many farmers that are trying to lease their land to wind and solar? It's because so many regulations in place that it's hard to be profitable being just a normal rancher or farmer. That's not how America should be. If Biden doesn't get reelected, what do you think happens? Seems like Democrats cannot afford to lose the election. Will people wake up if a Republican wins but continues clean energy agenda? No. I do not think... Okay, first, there's no way Biden is going to win re-election. But I think that in 2024, it's going to get so chaotic that in the end, Trump will have to bring forth martial law. And again, Trump is just fulfilling his role. And so I feel like it might take a back seat, but it still will be implemented by 2030. So I think that everything is going to plan, and I do think that it's meant to make Biden look really bad. Bidenomics and all this. again, next year, Biden, there's no way Biden will ever be reelected. And I don't think a Democrat will be elected. The last Republican president will be Trump. And then I think the United Nations will take over and start implementing again. Because, again, a big group of people are going to think that Trump is, the most evil person on this plane of existence. And he's not. He's, again, just a puppet. So those people are going to be really upset when he has to come in and strong arm people because there's so much chaos, people in the streets, these sleeper cells that everybody is talking about on Twitter, at least. Those sleeper cells are going to be activated next year. And all of that is going to make it so people are going to beg for the government to put its foot down. And it's order out of chaos. And so then when Trump does put his foot down and, clean up the streets, they are going to be out of control. How do you clean them up? Well, he's going to clean them up using the jackboot. And so then people are going to be really upset when he does implement perhaps martial law or just whatever. I'm not sure exactly how he's going to put the jackboot down to create order out of chaos. But when he does, people are going to be really upset on the left, of course. And so then they're going to beg the United Nations to please come save us from evil Trump. And that's what I think is going to happen. And so then the United Nations we will be asking, well, not we, but there will be a huge group of people in the United States of America that will literally beg the United Nations to save them. That is their plan. They need us to beg for it. Zoltan the man. I agree 100%. I think 2024 could possibly be the last presidential election. Yes, I definitely. It will be. And that's, again, that's just from everything that I have looked at. I'm not in charge of the plan, and they can change it. Of course, they can change it. Pull an audible. But overall, in the end, the goal is, however it has to be done, we beg for the United Nations to come into America. That is the end goal. And in order to do that, next year has to be insane. And it's already ramping up to be. Not only the sleeper cells, but then you have AI. You have all these voting changes that are happening. And mail-in ballots and just on and on and on. Like every aspect possible. And then, of course, you have the mysterious illness that's coming through. So just they're throwing everything and the kitchen sink at us this next year, including taking over the internet. It's going to be a hell of a ride, and as long as I am able to, I'm going to try to witness it and communicate it with people, and that's all I can do. But again, if they actually take control of the internet, then it doesn't matter if I'm on Rumble or if I'm on YouTube, right? It won't matter. So we'll see. We'll see what goes on. But hey, we know here, and hopefully we can tell our neighbors, and just like a pebble in a pond creates a ripple that goes all the way across the pond, perhaps each of us could be a little pebble, and we could reverberate the message, the truth, that this is a freaking takeover by the United Nations, the New World Order. And then maybe we won't beg for the United Nations to come and take us over in the name of saving us. We'll see. But again, if we survive to 2030, I have full faith we can actually create the world we want, like a good world, a fair world. But first, we got to survive. All right, so it's getting down to the wire here. I'm going to share this article, and I think everything else is supplemental. I've got the main points down. So I appreciate you guys hanging out, chatting with me, learning about Biden's rule playbook and the FCC take over the internet that's occurring right now. It's crazy. All right, so to carry out these tasks, the USDA has identified 7 key focus areas: establish and advance a soil carbon monitoring and research network with a perennial biomass component. Again, this is all about inventory and management of every resource on this plane of existence. So they're laying the foundation here. Biden's administration is. Establish and advance a greenhouse gas research network. Expand data management, infrastructure, and capacity. Improve models and tools for assessing greenhouse gas outcomes at operational, state, regional, and national scales. Improve NRCS conservation practice standards and implementation data to reflect greenhouse gas mitigation opportunities. Improve temporal and spatial coverage of national conservation activity data, which, again, conservation, we're talking about Wildlands Project, or America the Beautiful Challenge is what it's called now. Strengthen the greenhouse gas inventory and assessment program of the USDA. So the draft federal strategy presents a federal plan to enhance measurement, reporting, verification, agriculture, and forestry through 5 areas. So yeah, smart agriculture. Yeah. These include improved greenhouse gas and soil carbon monitoring, alignment and enhancement of related research, utilization of advanced models and tools for better estimations, and prompt and accurate collection of conservation data through better use of remote sensing data. Data is the new oil. So again, I will have all of the articles that I wanted to share with you that were supplemental to the main topics down in the description as well, if you want to get into them. I don't plan on coming back to this, actually. So let me know. Did you learn anything new? What do you think about the FCC taking over the internet? Do you think we can stop it? Let me know in the comments below. I think tomorrow I am going to try to do my first Rumble-only stream, 10 a.m. So come over there and hang out with me. I'm going to talk about all kinds of things that I find interesting that I can't talk about on YouTube, even though I talk about things I probably shouldn't anyway. But I'm going to get into the weeds tomorrow. And again, next Wednesday will be the space stream, okay? The space stream's coming. That's for you, Zoltan the man. I personally find the topic extremely fascinating, and I hope you will as well. So, I love you guys. Thank you for everything. I mean, it really does start to weigh on you if you think that you're the only one that actually cares about this takeover of our private property and America in general by the United Nations. And so I am thankful for each and every one of you, and I hope to see you tomorrow over on Rumble at 10 a.m. Peace out.